So depression is the body screaming for deep rest. They're going to Dubai for these European Arabs, and they are being defecated on, being urinated on, just to walk away.
Is that true?
With $75,000.
Wow.
Shadow power. And it's basically people who gain power through darkness. So they manipulate, they coerce. A lot of pastors are doing this.
Really? Pastors?
Absolutely. Manipulating people to believe that the only way they're going to know and get close to God is through them. You know, sometimes we don't have soulmates, we have wound mates. One person is a victim, the other person is a rescuer. I'm so glad you're in my life now. I was living such a horrible life before this. His ego is driven by his ability to make you feel better, and your victimhood is driven by someone rescuing you. If a woman was molested, abused, her identity is now encapsulated by that abuse. She's either sexually repressed or she's hypersexual. If you meet people who get offended that you didn't invite them to the party, that's a sure sign of an abandonment wound.
Really?
Yes. Sometimes you attach yourself to people who are good, but you have to find a reason to not trust them. Yeah, I couldn't trust them. I didn't like how they sat in the chair. And they made a look, and I just didn't like that look, right? Because of fear. Every dysfunctional family structure needs something that masks and hides that they created the damage. So guess what? We're gonna blame that son that's on drugs. I learned that I was a recovering codependent who needed to be needed, and the only way that I saw my worth was in how people used me. I was an emotional prostitute.
Wow.
I did not want to live, I wanted to die. And I masked my pain by performing. I was performative, you know? I wanted to just smoke marijuana to feel better until I hit rock bottom in 2014.
Wow.
I had to face myself. I had to look at the lie that I was living, and my father died. I thought that I was never gonna come up out of this rubble.
Hello guys, and welcome back again to another amazing episode. And most of you know this to be the diaspora transition episode. We have dialogue with diasporians who decided to leave the diaspora behind and currently living here in Ghana, on the continent, anywhere in Africa basically. And we've traveled to Senegal, Gambia, Kenya, other African countries doing the same thing. But we're back in my home country, Ghana, and continuing doing the same here, speaking with diasporian who moved back to the continent. Now, the guest I have on the show today, she's a real caring guest. I interviewed her a while ago with her family, together with her husband and kids. I didn't have their kids on there, but I had her and her husband. And she's back again on the show because she said something very important within the video, the interview that we had prior, that I wanted us to dive into it. So, she's back on it again. And she goes by the name Akuma Healing. Should I introduce it as Akuma Healing?
Sister Keisha.
Sister Keisha. So she goes by the name Sister Keisha. Welcome back again on the show.
Thank you for having me. I should say Madasi, right?
Yes. I reached out to you after our interview, and I spoke to you about mental health and what people are going through, mostly within our Black community. And normally people don't want to talk about it, So today, this conversation is going to be about mental health, but definitely people are watching you. They might not know who you are. They might not have watched the earlier episode. Briefly introduce yourself to the people watching.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Sister Keisha. Everyone in community where I lived in South Florida, they called me Sister Keisha. I went to an event one time like 20-something years ago, and someone said, "You're like everybody's sister. We should call you Sister Keisha."
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've just been Sister Keisha. But more importantly, I am an MSW. So I have a master's degree in social work. And what that has done for me is I've been doing therapy for a long time, working in organizations and working with groups. And in 2000, I had this awakening that I had a mother wound. I had pain through the relationship with my biological mother, and that I was ready to heal it. And when I got into the depths of my healing, I created a 4-week program called Healing the Inner Child from Pain to Purpose. And I just decided to go live one day and talk about what it means to have a mother wound and what it means to be a daughter and a Black woman who suffered from an abandonment wound through the relationship with my mother. And I woke up after I did the live, and it had like 80,000 views.
Wow.
And people were just messaging me saying, I've gone through this. I'm in a lot of pain. I need help. And I created Movements for Change. Movements for Change is an online portal that helps men and women transform their emotional pain into purpose. So shifting the energy from anger and using that anger to fuel something that makes us feel purposeful. Doesn't have to be something that we do, but it has to be somebody that we become. It has to be who we are. And so that's the testament of my life. That's how I am here in Ghana right now. So as you mentioned, I transitioned, I repatriated here in Ghana, and it's been a journey. But I see where the mental health need is here, and I'm just very, very thankful. I'm excited that you were open to open this dialogue with me today.
Now, I want us to just dive right into it. My first question to you is, are Black people immune to mental illness?
Okay, when you say immune, we're suffering. We're suffering.
The reason why I said that is I've had people who kind of say, oh, I'm Black, how can I get depressed?
Absolutely.
Right.
In particular, I think living in the States, I see something different from here in Ghana. I don't see any kind of language around mental health awareness in Ghana at all. I don't see where people, I think that our mental health here is being masked by some things, and I think we're going to get into that.
Okay.
But being Black in America, because of the society where we're isolated, families are very broken, people are suffering with addiction, alcoholism, gambling, sex addiction, and they're not talking about it. We live in such dispersed communities where you could have a brother that lives a mile away from you, and you see that brother once a year for Thanksgiving. I don't see that in Ghana. So the isolation allows us to kind of, even though we suffer in silence, when we're alone with ourselves, we can say, I think I'm struggling. I think I'm mentally ill. But what we do with it is what the issue is. We don't go to get help all the time. We don't talk about it openly. And that's the commonality that I'm seeing here in Ghana. Now, the masking here is different. I have Ghanaian friends who, as long as they can look good and smile and laugh and pretend to have a good time, no one is going to stop and say, how are you feeling? How's your mind? Because it's masked. People, they're having fun. Everybody drinks. You have a party. You listen to some music. You dance. You know, there isn't room for people to say, I think I'm suffering in my mind. People are going to either laugh or they're going to say that you're crazy. In Ghana, it appears to me that there's crazy and then there's not crazy, quote unquote. So you might see someone on the street eating out of the trash. And everyone is surrounding that person. People are walking, driving, minding their business. No one is worried about the man that's eating trash on the side of the road because that person is crazy. There's this subliminal agreement that whatever happened to them, they may deserve that. They didn't pray enough. They didn't do the right thing. So we're just going to act like we don't see this. Every day when I'm driving on a Flower Road or by Akrama and I see someone eating out of the trash, I saw this man take his clothes off completely. And everyone is I'm sitting here saying, is everyone just going to drive and act like this is not happening? It took something to get that person that way. We're all one step away from being right there if we don't take care of ourselves. What makes my mental health more important than his? I want to know. I'm actually asking. I want you to tell me, being that you're Ghanaian, you've been here. What is it that makes us drive past and see someone suffering like that and just act like it's not happening?
I think in Ghana, it's been a norm for, like you mentioned, it's almost like, maybe he smokes some weed. That's the stereotype surrounding that. Maybe he smoked some weed and then it just, you know what I'm saying, it made him went crazy. So when people look at people like that on the street, they just most of the time be like, oh yes, it's his fault that he's like that, or they'll just say, oh, it was juju, someone just did something to him in his village. So then we normally don't look at it like this is something that we can be solved or we can really take care of it. I mean, recently they've been, promoting, taking people into the psychiatric hospital. I think there was a celebrity who had a little issue with mental health, So that was when the attention on mental health began to come about, and then they took him to the mental health hospital, and then he came back fine. So people begin to understand, okay, this is actually something we can actually tackle. But back in the days, it was not like that.
And that's my point. It's like it's not until someone important or who is perceived as important. You know, status is a thing in Ghana. And it's not until someone who has status that speaks out about it that it becomes something that's valuable. And that I'm hoping and praying that my presence here will create some kind of shift. Yeah.
Let's speak about even mental illness or depression in the Black community in general, not just here in Ghana, but where you came from, example, in the US, for example, and also to the point where what causes such things? What are the characteristics?
Okay.
What are the causes? Do we get from family members? You know, what the trauma? Let's just dive right into it.
Let's get into it. Okay. So we're going to talk about things. I want to say that there are different levels of mental illness. You can have severe mental illness where there's psychosis, where it's schizophrenia. You talk to yourself. You have delusions. You're not attached to this reality, right? You're like in another world. And there's spiritual understanding for that, but traditional medicine doesn't make room for the spiritual understanding. It's just like, okay, we're going to give them a label. We're going to give them medicine. But then there's the day-to-day level where it's like, I feel sad. I feel worried. Right? We don't relate to ourselves through feelings enough. People don't say, I feel sad. People say, you made me mad. Look at what you did to me. We love to blame. Right? If I said I feel sad, now that changes everything. Because now I have to give attention to myself. And that the word that we run away from collectively as people of color is vulnerability. It's just like why I was impressed with you wanting to have this conversation. It meant that you were willing to be vulnerable enough. Most people run from it. So when we talk about depression and anxiety, depression is I'm stuck in the past. Anxiety is I'm stuck in the future. Both of them don't allow us to be present. All right? So depression is the body screaming for deep rest. That's why we have the word depressed. We're crying for deep rest. We become very compulsive when we're depressed. We can overshop. We can over-gossip. We can over-mask. I know what that looked like in the States. And I'm going to speak to you as a Jamaican American, Ghanaian, right? Who, in my family culture, if you look good, everything is fine. You could be depressed. You could be anxious. You could be worried. But if you live in a nice house and you drive a nice car and you look good, that nobody's worried about that. So sometimes we mask our way enough when we really are crying for deep rest. We need to rest. But resting is not allowed. How can I rest when I have to pay for the mortgage? I have to make sure everybody is dressed in Gucci or Versace or Louis Vuitton. I have to make sure that we're traveling and we're keeping up with this travel bug, black travel vlog, whatever, all these trends, social media. How can I rest when I have to keep up? So I believe that the root of these sicknesses is capitalism. Yes. Capitalism says, you are what you do. So if you can just do enough, and it's never enough. No matter how much we do and no matter how much we attain, we always want to one up that thing that we thought that we did. So how can you get deep rest? How? It's not happening. Same thing with anxiety. So let's talk about what anxiety is. Anxiety is, I am stuck in the future. I need to control the outcome. So I'm going to worry myself into that control. I need to make it right. I need to be so attached to the outcome that I cannot be present in my now. So I'm doing a bunch of things, right? We're human beings, but we're too busy being human doings. We're trying to outdo ourselves to have outcomes that we believe are what's right. So what ends up happening is we suffer from a lot of guilt and shame. So let's say I come from a culture. No, not let's say. I'm going to be transparent. I do come from a culture where You are what you do. People do favors for others and talk about it. Yeah, I had to give Keisha $500 for this and that because that makes them feel better, right? So now I am attached to what I do. So here I am in a situation where I made an investment and things went really bad and I'm going to lose my house. Do you think that I'm going to tell everybody that I lost my house?
No.
Oh no, my family and I were staying at Movenpick for 2 weeks. Yeah, we're so blessed. We're so fortunate. Hallelujah. God is good. We can do that and suffer at night and argue with our spouses and beat our children and abuse our children that nobody sees. We can do that and come out.
Do you see more people like that?
I see more people like that. I see more people. Not that I see. I work with more people like that.
Wow.
Yes, I do.
Why don't you want to be honest with each other and be vulnerable to each other? What do you think is stopping us?
Judgment and the critic, the inner critic. There's no worse critic than ourselves. But we experience criticism and judgment from our families.
Yeah.
That's where I first experienced it.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So, I remember when I decided to grow locks. At the time, it wasn't normalized and it wasn't popularized, even in American culture, even being Jamaican. People think Jamaicans are cool, like Bob Marley. No, Jamaicans have ideas of elitism and classism that run deep. And we're not going to rag. I'm not putting down or demeaning the culture, but we need to talk about the reality of what's happening. And some of it is deeply rooted in the institution of slavery. Because we learned that Jamaica was colonized by the British. Okay, so we know what it means because Ghana was colonized by the British.
Yes.
We know what it means to be colonized by the British. The same ailments that are happening here are happening there. So yeah, I come from a family culture where the lighter skinned children were treated better.
Wow.
Absolutely. And the darker skinned children, I just so happen to have been one of the darker skinned children in my family culture. I always felt like the outcast. I always felt like something was wrong with me.
Wow.
Always. I can't remember a time.
What did they do that make you feel like that?
And that's the thing. It's very passive aggressive. No one ever came out and said, you're dark skinned, you get less. You're light skinned, you get more. But it's body language. It's how you're being spoken to. It's, why did you do that? And when you really didn't do much, right? So I came from this family culture that said, we do things a certain kind of way. And what you're doing is going against what we do collectively.
Right.
And I had a cousin who said this to me not long ago. And I really want to talk about it. She said, sometimes it feels very cultish. Cultish. Yeah, because if the people that are on the top, whoever decides that they're the ones that are on the top.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was growing up, the people who were on the top were the people who lived in nice homes that didn't have carpet. They had tiles. And their houses were newer than others.
Yeah.
And my house wasn't as new. And when they came to my house, my mother made us clean the heck up. I'm talking about, I kept thinking, why are we trying to impress these people?
Yeah.
We had to do things and put on our new clothes and look a certain way because they're coming over.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the family culture ever sat and had a conversation about the impact that had. So then here I come, the adult Keisha, who's a mental health professional, who's ready to have these open conversations. How do you think the family culture feels about me? I'm the bad guy. I am the scapegoat. I'm the problem. How dare you talk about the pedophile in our family? Or how dare you talk about classism? Or how dare you talk about how we made you feel? We love you. So there's this lack of understanding about respecting people's feelings and emotions if those feelings are going to bring to light your darkness.
So they're gatekeeping, or like, I don't know.
Yes, I like that. Stick with that. They're gatekeeping. There's this protection and there's this pact.
I think even when it comes to marriages down here in Africa, Ghana, there are some people who entered marriages, some women, and later on find out that their husband probably doing some certain things that made them depressed, where it kind of, their mental health was at stake. They went back to their family and they were like, I don't think I can continue this, but they were like, stick with it because we don't want you to bring disgrace
Absolutely.
to our family, just to be able to, keep looking posh to the outside world. Let's speak on
Brother
that.
Hayford, I have 2 people that died by suicide in a month apart from each other. We are killing ourselves to meet your standards. We are dying. We're dying a slow death with alcohol addiction, drug addiction, sex addiction. We're dying a slow death, and some of us are dying a fast death by suicide. We have to shed light to these problems. You cannot tell someone, no, do not shame. That's a typical thing in the Jamaican culture. You might have a stepfather who's molesting a wife's daughter, and the mother says, we're going to send you away. You're going to be a problem. I don't need people knowing that he did this to you.
Wow.
So now this child is going to get sent away to be with their grandmother. Because if this child stays here, eventually it's going to come out that you were getting molested by my husband. That is a problem. That is a problem.
So they put their selfish interests first rather than the child's mental health or her sanity.
Absolutely. And this is how we develop wounds. So we have different wounds that we grow with. You have, and I'm going to name a few if that's okay.
Yeah.
You have the abandonment wound. And the abandonment wound says, I am afraid of being left out. If you meet people who get offended that you didn't invite them to the party, that person may have, that's a sure sign of an abandonment wound.
Really?
Yes. And this is what I do in my work. When I help people see how their responses to triggers, what it really means, they're like, oh my God, I never knew. But then when we get into the session and we find out their mother left them with their grandmother when they were 5 years old. You were abandoned. You didn't even call it that. So that abandonment wound makes you afraid of being left out. It makes you afraid of being alone. It makes you attach yourself to people who are going to abandon you because we actually are attracted to what's familiar.
Really?
Yes, we are. We love familiarity, and we also love being the victim. So if we attach to what's familiar, and if what's familiar is not good for us, then what are we going to end up being in the end?
Interesting.
A victim. So now we could say, yes, he did that to me.
And almost like they love it, then they will go to another one and do it again and again.
It's just
and
a new
again.
face. So you have the abandonment wound. Then you have the guilt wound. Many of us come from family cultures where there's a lot of guilt throwing. You have 2 people in the world, guilt throwers and guilt catchers. You don't want to be either one. So guilt throwers will make you feel bad, and guilt catchers will own that. I'm sorry. So the guilt wound, have you ever met someone who, I'm sorry, my hair is a mess.
Yeah.
What did your hair have to do? What did their hair have to do with you?
Yeah.
That's someone who's suffering from a guilt wound. Yes.
Wow. Interesting.
I'm sorry, I'm late. I'd rather say thank you for your patience. And not, I'm sorry I'm late, because I'm not a sorry person, right? But that's what the healing looks like. You have the guilt wound, you have the abandonment wound, and then you have a trust wound. The trust wound says, I don't trust anyone, I don't even trust myself. But you attach yourself to people that are not trustworthy so that you can victimize yourself. Or sometimes you attach yourself to people who are good, but you have to find a reason to not trust them. And even tell a story about that. That might not even be the truth about that person. Yeah, I couldn't trust them. I didn't like how they sat in the chair. They made a look, and I just didn't like that look, right? Because of fear. So we have the abandonment wound, we have the guilt wound, and we have the trust wound. And then there's the neglect wound. Neglect is you weren't taken care of, so you really don't know how to take care of yourself. And you attach yourself to people where you have to be their caretaker. You are overgiving, overly nice, and it's not reciprocated, and then you complain. I had to do this for them. I had to do that. Imagine I did all these things and they never, but you attached yourself to that. So we have to be aware of our wounds. We have to be aware, because all of those wounds can trigger depression, anxiety, or something even greater than that. That person that you see eating out of the trash. Yeah.
Wow, this is interesting. Do you think in general the world is getting more mentally ill?
I do. I do.
What is the major cause of this?
I believe that social media is contributing to that. I believe that capitalism is contributing to that. I believe that music,
Music.
when we look at the people behind the music industry, in particular mainstream music in America, all of these rappers, I don't know, Top Off, Earlift, I don't know their names.
Sexy Red.
You Sexy Red, you know, all of these, you know, the people behind these messages, because there's an agenda. There's an agenda to get to the young people. Because if you can control their minds, and you control how they think and how they feel. And there's one thing that they're not telling us that they've activated in their lives, but the regular, all of us who are day-to-day people living, they're hiding, and it's mind science. So everything has a vibrational frequency. Everything, even my glasses that you see right here, it's vibrating on a frequency. The book, nothing is still. So if you're spewing words to a rhythm, and these words are sending a particular message, that message is going to echo in the voice of the children. So when we're talking about the violence, and we're talking about, because I've tried my best to listen to some of these songs. It's telling you what they're going to do, who they robbed, what they got, who they went, the money they got, how much, what they bought with the money. I mean, that's a problem. That is a problem. So now we're talking about desire. We're talking about desire. And if there's oppression, there's mental illness. So if you have a desire amidst oppression, what's going to happen?
What's going to happen?
You're going to be willing to rob, kill, steal, do whatever to get that thing that you desire to have.
Interesting.
Not everyone is motivated by success. And success, some people want to get it the fast way. So we're living in this culture now where the music and pop culture and all of these messages and social media, it's telling us, and you know, because you see it. We talk about influencers. What does that word mean? Someone who can influence the mind of someone else. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Interesting. Now, I think people get so much consumed with seeing their these celebrities wearing nice Gucci, whatever, even with the women. And now in Ghana, what I think I've seen so far, based on what I've researched and learned, is the women are now into lots of hookup and then prostitution to be able to get enough money to buy all these fancy phones, jewelries, and stuff like that.
I just saw Dr. Umar Johnson in a video talking about how a lot of them are going to Dubai from Ghana and Nigeria. I if you can find it, it would be good. They're going to Dubai for these European Arabs, and they are being defecated on, being urinated on, just to walk away with $75,000.
Wow.
And I went to make an appointment to my dentist the other day. Someone referred me to a dentist, and I was making my appointment, and I couldn't find the location. So I said, let me go on my maps. And I went on Google Maps, and this thing came up about butt lift. And I said, this is not the dental office. Why is it telling me butt lift? I didn't make an appointment to get a butt lift. I need to find a dentist. So I called the dentist, and I'm like, I went online. The lady's like, hello. I'm like, I went online, and I'm looking for your dental office, and it's telling me that I can get a butt lift, and I can get a tummy tuck, and I can get a breast reduction. I can get my breast bigger. What's happening? And she said, yes, ma'am, we do that too. I said, I'm not going to that dental office. What is this? And why are they doing this in Ghana? Wow. So I said to my husband, I said, some of these butts that you're looking at, they're big because they got them implanted. He says, no. I said, let me show you on the thing.
Well, I'll vouch for Ghanaian women, and that's a majority of them are natural. But now, because it's now kind of global to have a huge ass, now Ghanaians who don't have are very insecure and now trying to get that. But then back in the days, Ghanaians are known for naturally having
I know that. I'm a Ghanaian. I know that. It's natural. Okay, it's big and it's natural. But listen, we're talking about mental illness. The person who feels like they have to get that done, what do you think when they didn't have that big butt, how they felt?
Insecurity.
That depression. Insecurity. That leads to depression. That leads to emotions. Emotions are energy in motion. So what kind of actions are you taking if you feel sad? What are you doing if you feel sad?
I don't know. Reach out to someone you can confide in.
That's not what they're doing. They're
What do you do?
drinking, they're hiding, there's enough mask material out there. You could go to church on a Sunday and feel high, and then Monday to Saturday be depressed. There's enough that's masking what we do. We do not reach out to not a damn body. Okay? That's what we should be doing.
How can we change that?
Okay, well, that's why we're here, right? How can we change that? First of all, these conversations are the first step, because I truly believe that someone is watching this and they're gonna reach out. And the video that we did, it wasn't about mental health, the one that we originally did.
Yes.
But when I looked in the comments, and I've actually gotten new transformees, because I don't use the word clients for my people, through that video, people reached out to me.
Oh, wow.
So this I'm hoping, right? So the first thing that we're doing is we're normalizing. When we remove the stigma from the conversation, if I come out, you know how many women have come to me because I've come out and said, when I was growing up as a child, I love my mother. I love my mother dearly. But she didn't have the tools to handle her emotions. And when she got angry, there were days when she looked at me and called me a bitch. It depends on the day. Some days I was a little bitch. Some days I was a dirty bitch. Right?
Really?
Absolutely.
Because you made mention in the earlier interview. So
I did. I did.
Oh, wow.
I didn't say myself, but I'm comfortable with saying,
Okay.
child, I done been written out,
how did that make you feel at that young age?
Well, I was definitely, I had suicidal ideation. I never killed myself because I'm alive. I'm here, right? I'm thankful that I didn't. But I had days between the age of 16 and 21 in particular. I did not want to live. I wanted to die.
Wow.
I did. I wanted to die, and I never said this. I mean, my family members will probably see this.
Wow.
And they're going to be like, what in the world? I wanted to die. I actually wanted to kill myself, but I didn't have the guts to do it. And I would contemplate, maybe if I just met in an accident. And I'm going to be honest, everything is energy and everything is frequency. And I have had so many illnesses in my life in the past. Thankfully, I'm awakened, I am well, I'm happy to be here, and I've transformed my life.
Wow.
And I've been very well and healthy for a long time. But when I was in my mental sickness, because it was a sickness, this is the mothership, this is the mind. And if the mind is not stable and steady, then you're the opposite of wellness is what? Sickness. I'm okay with saying I was mentally unwell. In that sickness, I might have attracted all of the illnesses. I always had a cold. I was always stuffy nose. I had surgery. I mean, if I tell you about the ailments that have come upon my body, and when I think about my state of mind, I was not well. Between 16 and 21, I would think, maybe if I just met in an accident, maybe if I met in that I would just die.
Where were your friends and family at that time? Where were they? Were they around you?
I don't think I really had any friends. How could you have a friend if you're not honest with that person? I'm sure there are people who loved me, but I had a lot of superficial relationships. You know, at that stage of my life. If I think back, nothing was really real because I wasn't real with myself. I wasn't ready to say, you know, bless my father, he transitioned. I couldn't even tell him what I was suffering from. You know what I mean? Because my father would say things like, I promise you this is what my dad, I remember one time I tried to tell him I was depressed. He said, you know what? You've been around too much white people.
Wow,
He said,
really?
you've been around too much white people. You're taking on their habits.
Wow.
Yeah, I could not have that conversation with my father. You know, I wanted to just smoke marijuana to feel better or mask it. I used to be a performing artist. I was a part of a dance company that was very well known, Venus Rising, Roots and Culture. And I masked my pain by performing. I was performative.
Wow.
So I was always the best employee. I was always the best dancer. I was always the best of whatever I was in because people
Just to cover
validated me.
Your pain, to cover your pain.
Absolutely. People validated me. People made me, I graduated, I skipped a grade. I went to college when I was 17. I was top You know, I would hear my mother brag about my accomplishments. So I caught wind to that. I'm like, okay, I did this and this happened. Okay, I just need to do more of this. Until I hit rock bottom in 2014.
Wow.
I did. I hit rock bottom. And it was not good. It was good.
Take me to the worst point in 2014.
The rock bottom for me in 2014 was I had to face myself. I had to remove my mask. I had to look in the mirror. I had to look at the lie that I was living. And I crashed. And my father died. And that was like, I thought that I was never going to come up out of this rubble. I really thought, and I was blessed. I went by myself one day. I just sat in my car and I was crying. I just thought that I'm 37 years old and I've been living a lie my entire life. And now my father just died and he was the only person that made me feel like a human being. This is what I believed to be true, you know? And I was in my car crying and I went into Whole Foods supermarket to buy a green juice, like a spirulina or something healthy. And I was in the line, and I'll never forget, there was a young lady in the line in front of me. And she turned around to me and she started talking to me. And I don't know, the conversation went on and we got to talking about wellness. And she said to me, I go to a support group every week because I'm healing this thing. And you're welcome to come. And I didn't want to go. I took the information, I took her number, and I went to the bookstore, and this book, all in one day, I left from her, got the information, went to the Barnes & Noble, because books have saved my life. Wow. And I went to the bookstore, and this book fell off the shelf.
As soon as you got there?
As soon as I got there. And it was this yellow and white book, and it said, Anxious to Please, 7 Habits of the Chronically Nice.
Wow.
And I bought the book, and I read the book in one night. And I woke up 5 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up and I touched my husband and I said, I need to get admitted into a mental institution. I don't feel good.
Wow.
And he looked at me, he said, what happened? And I said, I've been living a lie. I've lied to you. I've lied to everyone in my life. I've masked myself through trying to be nice and taking care of everyone else, and I've been suffering, and I hate this, and I can't do this anymore.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of the end.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing this.
Thank you.
Wow. So that book gave you the courage to be able to come forth, to be honest about what you were going through.
And then I went to the group the following week that she told me about. And I learned that I was a recovering codependent who was anxious to please, who needed to be needed because I didn't love myself. And the only way that I saw my worth was in how people used me. I was an emotional prostitute.
Wow.
I was suffering from what I call emotional prostitution.
Elaborate on that.
Emotional prostitution is where you allow others to use you. And it was learned behavior. I watched my mother suffer from this. Constantly bringing people into your life that will use you and then walk away empty and being a victim and saying, I did this and I did that and how could that happen? I became okay with being alone. I didn't know how to be with myself. I didn't know how to be with myself.
Wow.
And that happened August of 2014, and on December 5th, my father passed away. And my life changed. The rest is the history. That's how I got here. That's how my life changed forever.
Because I've seen what you've been able to grow out of that and now offering this help to people.
Man, have I grown out of it. My life is not the same. I don't depend on other people to build my self-worth because that comes from inside. I love myself. And to all the people who I made believe that they validated me more than I validated myself, I'm sorry. I lied to you too. I love myself, and I teach people how to love themselves. And I teach people how to walk away from the victim trap. I teach people how to see their worth and how to manifest their truth from that.
I like that. Now, when someone look at you, they'll never anticipate
they would never know.
Yeah.
They would never. And there's so many parts of the story. I'm skipping details.
We love details here. Please feel free to share.
I'm skipping details. Oh my God. I was an emotional prostitute. That's the only word that I can have for what I was doing. Everyone had permission to use me. And I didn't want to be with myself. I didn't want to tap into my own gifts. And what I found out in letting everyone go and really being present with myself and my pain was that I'm a bad, can I say that I'm a bad bitch? Like, I'm a powerful woman of light. And when you are light, you will attract darkness. You know, you will attract darkness. You have this thing called shadow power. And it's basically people who gain power through darkness. So they manipulate, they coerce. A lot of pastors are doing this.
Really? Pastors?
Absolutely.
How?
They're shadow power.
How do they do that?
So manipulating people to believe that the only way they're going to know and get close to God is through them. They're getting power through your perceived weakness.
Interesting.
That is shadow power. Through coercion, through manipulation, making you believe that you're nothing without them. That is narcissistic, that is ego, and that is what I call shadow power. Yeah.
Wow.
Everything you need is within you. Everything. Everything you need is right inside of you. And anyone who makes you believe that you have to look outside of yourself to be powerful, they're lying, they're using you. They're using your weakness to gain power. You know, when we watch these movies, Disney movies and these superhero movies, the villain is always fueling their power from someone else's weakness.
Yeah. True.
That's what's happening on a spiritual level. When we walk and we look through the earth, pay attention. Pay attention after you watch this. Pay attention.
That. Now, I want you to go back a little bit. Whilst you were going through when you were 16 to 21, how were you living?
I was not living good.
Like, try to walk me through a week.
I'll tell you what was happening. I was very impulsive emotionally. I remember one time I was in a dance company, and you know, I had to take a break because I had my daughter. This was closer to like 24 because my daughter was born when I was 24.
Okay.
But still, there are layers, and it was still carried on, you know? I just did a good job at masking it. But I remember there was somebody who the dance company put in my place because I was on my maternity leave. And there was a woman in the company who came to me and said, oh, you know, they replaced you. They put someone in your place. She was activating her shadow power because she knew that she saw my weakness and that I had low self-esteem, and that if she told me that, I lost sleep for at least 1 week because I thought that these people didn't want me in their company anymore. And that was far from the truth. So I suffered in anxiety. And that's what it looks like sometimes. Sometimes it looks like losing sleep. It looks like compulsive thoughts. It looks like ideation, overly thinking something that's happening. It looks like judging yourself harshly to the point of not being able to complete a task or overly completing a task, but wearing yourself out to the point of nothingness.
Wow.
That's the way that I was living my life.
Now, how do one begin to realize the symptoms of mental illness or depression? How do you identify that? Okay, wait a minute. This is what I'm doing. I'm not like this person. Then I need to seek for what? What do they have to?
There's a small space between the trigger and your reaction. You need to connect with that small space. There's a very, very tiny, tiny space between whatever the thing is that's happening. So in this case, the trigger was this woman came and told me that they replaced me, right? And immediately, because I was operating from a place of autopilot. So I want to talk about what the process looks like. everything that your body learns to do, meaning as far as responding to the trigger, is something that you learned from your childhood. So if you grew in an environment, so I talk openly about my mother wound and the pain that I had in that relationship. At one point, my mother and I are actually in a good place now. I love her, you know, and I'm thankful for everything. But there was pain and there was trauma. So let's say you come from an environment. So in my environment, I was an only girl, right? So I'll give a true example. So my mother would always, like if she had a friend who had a daughter, she would always do wonderful things, be nice to that daughter, you know, be loving to that daughter, you know, take the daughter to on a job interview. And then now when it was time for me, even though my mother would be loving and nice in general and in front of others, but there were times when it was mean and it was harsh and it was hard, right? So now I developed this wound that says I am not enough. So fast forward to when this woman came to my house and said, oh, you know, they replaced you. That didn't stop. That wound didn't go away. I just became an adult. Just because we grow into our bodies doesn't mean that the limiting beliefs that we had in our childhood, they don't go away. So now my body is doing what it knows to do. It's reacting in the same way that it did when I was the 16-year-old girl that my mother said, you know, or did this thing. So now the only thing I knew how to do then, because no one taught me anything different, was to react, to cry, to be a victim, to think, oh my God, I'm going to be abandoned again. So all you're doing is replaying a narrative. The body releases a stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol wears and tears the brain. It causes damage to the brain.
Really?
Yes.
Cortisol.
Cortisol causes damage to the brain. If we have just enough cortisol that's good for the body, then we learn how to respond. So if a dog that was a killer dog ran in here right now, the cortisol would do what? It would make us do what?
Try to kill it or run away.
And thank you. We would do an appropriate response. Me and Hayford would be in here fighting the dog, right? Because the body gets to rush. But when there's too much and you didn't learn how to regulate your emotions, if no one taught you how to regulate when that flush happened, now you're living a life of dysregulation.
Wow.
So when the trigger comes back at 24, at 35, at 45, guess what? You're just going to react the same way until you learn something new.
Interesting. Let's talk about parents, our parents, and how they treat us, and you know, some things they might have done, but they didn't really think about what it would do to the children. That now we are suffering from.
Oh my gosh, so much, and the sibling stuff too. Oh my goodness, because you have some parents that are very skillful with their passive aggression. So they know how to turn the siblings against each other.
Right.
They know how to create a good child and a bad child. They know how to, you know, because if you have that, every dysfunctional family needs children that make them feel better.
Wow. Elaborate on that.
Every dysfunctional family structure needs something that masks and hides that they created the damage. Because if the world knows you created the damage, now you got to be held accountable.
Exactly.
So guess what? We're going to blame that son that's on drugs. Oh yeah, I tried to help Kwame. We put him in every rehab. Oh Lord, he stole my bag. Nobody's going to talk about what was happening in the house when Kwame was growing up. Now we're just talking about what we see today.
That's very deep, because I know it's in so many other families. You're surprised, and even here in Ghana, it's so much that we don't want to talk about it. You know, we don't want to talk about it because it's a sticky subject, and then they always put the blame on the children.
Absolutely. I've been doing this work for a while, and I've been doing public speaking for many years now. And you know, there was a grand opening of this cultural center in South Florida. I won't call any names, but I was the keynote speaker for the grand opening. And, you know, this is what we were talking about.
Right.
Dysfunctional families, parenting, rape, pedophilia, sexual abuse. And this woman got up and she started crying and she said, I was raped and no one talked about it. They didn't give me permission. My mother told me that I got what I deserved, that I made him do that to me. Okay? And I validated her. And this man got up and he started cursing me off. He was like, what you're doing is evil. And he said, my son hasn't spoken to me in 30 years. And it's because of people like you.
Wow.
He was upset, right? Because we were putting the mirror in front of him to say, you might have to check in how you created this dysfunction. Why wouldn't your son speak to you for 30 years? What happened? Okay, so we have certain behaviors by controlling parents, manipulative parents, abusive parents who don't want to change. And those behaviors look like manipulation. It looks like I'm going to make you, sometimes even they're rescuing. Let's talk about rescuing, meaning enabling. So everything that your life is having these challenges and they show up and they help you.
Right.
So now that's manipulation, because if they do something wrong, you can't even, there's no room for you to address it, because they're going to say, please, I had to give you $1,000 last week. So what if I ignored you? Or so what if I called you this name? Or so what if I'm the only one that you have. You have nobody else. So now this enabling becomes financial abuse. It becomes manipulation. It becomes coercion. And you are failing at life and don't even know why.
Interesting. Wow. Let's move. I want to. My next question to you is: in this modern day, you said that something about the economy. There's a word that you used, capitalism.
Yes.
And work. That's, I mean, working too much and not taking enough rest, it develops into stress.
Yes.
Does stress cause any kind of mental illness?
Yes. And cortisol is correlated with stress. So I even talk about weight gain. You know, if your body is under stress and you're releasing all this cortisol, guess what? It signals the body to produce fat. Fat.
Okay.
Because the body thinks there's danger. And that we have organs in our body. We have cells. So the body produces fat naturally to protect itself. So when I meet someone who's struggling with weight, and they're like, I eat good, I'm doing this, I'm thinking, let's talk about your stress level. What are you worried about?
Right.
Let's have a conversation.
Wow.
Why are you overworked? Let's talk about what you're not telling me.
Interesting. If you are too stressed, you can be fat.
Of course you have weight gain from stress. That's
This
how
is
we
very
develop
useful
disease,
information.
diabetes, and hypertension. I read a story of this old lady who lifted up a car because her grandson was under the car.
Wow.
But the cortisol flowed through her body and gave her the ability
Energy
to
to
do
do
that. But when it's dysregulated, so imagine having a trigger that's not even real danger, but you're reacting to it as though it's a threat. So have you ever met someone who's very defensive? That's cortisol.
Interesting.
Have you ever met someone who has this small trigger, but this big response?
Like you exaggerate.
Like it appears as if they're exaggerating how they're reacting. That's something related to their trauma. When we see someone reacting that way, we have to say, what happened to you? Is everything okay? Tell
And
me.
then they'll get more angry when you
Of course they will. Because anger is the mask of sadness.
I like that.
Anger is the mask of sadness. When someone is angry, deep down they're sad. And they don't have the words to say, I'm sad. They might be afraid. There may be shame around that. Anger is an easy emotion to go to. Why? Because it appears to protect us. It has the appearance of protection. Right? But what if we yield to the emotion of sadness and we say, okay.
Because that makes you look weak.
Because that makes you look weak. Thank you. Thank you. So we react defensively, thinking we're exerting power. Right? But every time we allow cortisol to rule how we are responding, and we're actually damaging the brain. There are parts of the brain that's needed for socialization, like the hypothalamus.
What is that?
The hypothalamus is a part of the frontal cortex, and if you if it has wear and tear, then you might struggle with how you socialize. You might be someone who isolates a lot.
Let's speak on that. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's isolation. Now, I'm not a doctor of the brain, and I don't want to. A lot of what I'm teaching is just research and work that I've done over the years. So I don't misrepresent. I am an MSW. I have a master's degree in social work. For many years, I was diagnosing and living in that treatment world. So it's very familiar to me. But there are parts of the brain that when there's wear and tear on it, it affects our ability to socialize properly. We can't even break down information. A trauma brain struggles with breaking down information. A trauma brain struggles with memory. I meet people all the time in my work and they're like, I don't remember anything from my childhood, Sister Keisha. Well, of course you don't. Look at there are some things that had happened that you do remember that you're telling me was really bad. And in order to survive, you had to dissociate from your body.
Interesting. I like
so
that.
now you're this adult person who's highly dissociated, not connected to your body, wondering why this person abused you. You're not even connected to your body enough to feel your own feelings.
Interesting. Wow.
Right? That's stress.
Well, all these things you're telling me, I have made so much research prior to this interview. And I still have no clue about most of the things. And I really appreciate it because I know I'm learning and most people watching are going to learn too.
Well, I have this thing that I say when I do my program, Healing the Inner Child from Pain to Purpose, my 4-week program. I tell this, because if you choose to work with me, you really have to be someone that's stepping out of denial or ready to step out of denial. I'm not the person that you're going to come to if you're in denial. Not that. I'm very compassionate and loving in my work, but we go deep. And if you're in denial and you're not ready to face what has happened to you and how it shapes how you show up as an adult, and you're not willing to hold yourself accountable for your own change, it's not going to go well. You're going to get mad at me, right? But I tell people in my work, there's a lot that we know we don't know. So you and I, Hayford, we know that we don't fly planes.
Yeah.
Because if we did, we'd probably be out flying right now.
Yeah.
We're not pilots. We know that for sure. That's a known. But what about the information that you don't know you don't know? What about the information that you don't even know that you don't know? It's when you watch something like this and you sit down, you're like, hold on, wait a minute. Because you didn't even know you didn't know that.
So if people are watching this in the sofa next to their partners and they are watching us right now, what are some of the things that they should look at in each other to identify if there's depression or there's trauma building up in even a couple? In a couple,
okay. That's a good thing because, sometimes we don't have soulmates, we have wound mates. People that we attach to. Sometimes we have a trauma bond. I'm going to talk about what a trauma bond is.
Let's get into it.
Trauma bond is where one person is a victim, the other person is the rescuer.
Okay.
So I meet this man and I love him. I think I love him. He's taking me out and treating me and everything feels so good. And, I tell him, oh my God, I'm so glad you're in my life now. I was living such a horrible life before this. His ego is driven by his ability to make you feel better. And your victimhood is driven by someone rescuing you. So now you've developed a trauma bond.
Wow. Thinking that is love.
Thinking that is love.
Interesting.
Now this man, he probably has an abandonment wound. He probably has a father wound. His father probably wasn't there for him, and the way he manifests to feel better is to make other people happy. And maybe he uses his money to do this. And this woman, who also has an abandonment wound, who never felt loved by her family or her mother or somebody, and she's always this victim, but she shows up in her perfectionism, and he thinks he got a good catch.
Wow.
And now they're bonded from trauma. So if you're a couple and you're watching this and you're like, hold up, what has been happening?
Yeah.
Be open and honest. First with yourselves. And then when you feel safe with each other. Or you might be watching this and you might be in a relationship that you've been wanting to leave. And this video, or this, I'm old school video, this
podcast
you know,
video,
this
it's
podcast,
okay.
whatever you're watching, is like, you're like saying, I have to go. It's time.
Now, behind cameras, you made mention of wound mates, like we just addressed, and then people are healing using sex as means. Do you mind? Let's
let's
talk
about it. So a lot of times, we attach ourselves to our ability to pleasure someone. And so we use sex. We become performative. And sex is a performance. So we use... Now, a couple of things I want to address. If a woman has been sexually abused or molested in her life, her identity is deeply rooted in sex, in her ability to either have sex or not. She might be afraid to be vulnerable sexually, or she might be hypersexual.
Take that again.
If a woman was molested, abused, traumatized sexually at any time of her life, her identity is now encapsulated by that abuse, which means she's either sexually repressed and afraid to express herself sexually, or she's hypersexual and over-sexualized. So promiscuity or hypersexualization, performance-wise.
So chances that people who are like that suffered from
some type of abuse.
in
Absolutely.
their childhood.
High chances. Absolutely. But if a man is not keen to that, he's going to think he got a good catch. He got somebody. She did this and she did that and we did this and that. And now there's darkness.
Do you think partners should approach their, better half to say, I think it's great that you have high sexual energy, but then we should address the fact that you might or maybe might not have had an abuse when you were a child.
Yeah,
Do you think we should?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If anyone is hypersexualized, dealing with addictions, because when we talk about anything hyper, we're talking about addiction.
Right.
And I don't like the word addiction because it has a negative connotation to it. So let's use the word attachment.
Attachment, okay.
Yeah, that's what I teach in my work. The art that, like, we attach to things to make us feel better. So some people attach to, you asked me how I was when I was in my pain.
Yeah. I
I attached to gossip. I was oh my goodness. Let me air my dirty laundry. And that was my attachment.
In Ghana, most women love gossip.
Well, that is not a part of my life now or my narrative, and I redirect energies that show up in that way. I don't engage in conversations that don't uplift, empower myself or anyone else. But I wasn't always like that because I felt so empty and dark that somebody telling me something bad about somebody else made me feel good. And I'm being honest. Right? And sometimes we need the ego to attach to an idea about ourselves. So not only am I going to feel good about it, but I'm going to say, ooh, I would never do that. Right? Now I got to make myself look good. Those are all red flags. When I meet someone who's constantly trying to prove I think to myself, they don't know that I know because they don't know that I was once where they are. I think, what the hell is this person suffering from that makes them constantly need somebody else to see what they've done? Right? So yeah, when we become performative in any way, sexually, and using sex. So back to the wound mate and the soulmate thing though. It is this thing that happens where we build a bond that's rooted in our pain. And we think that it's love. Then a year, 2 years, or 3 years later, oh no, I'm done with him. I don't want nothing. And then we just go and find someone else.
To continue that.
To continue. Because if you don't step out of denial to see how you contributed to that bond, then it's always someone else. It's always blaming someone else.
Talking about wound, I think you moved from the US. You've been here in Ghana, and within that your community, which is the African American community, the diaspora in general. Let's talk about the trauma. You made mention that our people are coming down here with trauma.
They are. A lot of people are coming here because they think this is going to be better. And some people are running from themselves. And some people are coming here to heal. However it's manifesting, diasporians have trauma. And I'm not sure, I have not seen a space where that trauma is addressed collectively. Because again, the same shame that we had when we were there, we come here in the same shame. I've seen diasporians bad talking other diasporians for not listening to their advice.
Really?
Yeah, we told you that don't do this or you're going to get scammed. People learn at their own pace. People learn at their own pace. No one can control how someone else learns their process coming here to Ghana. You know what I mean? So some of these behaviors are truly indicative of some type of mental, some challenge that's happening. But it doesn't show up in that way. So nobody thinks, is this okay? Is everything okay with this person? You know, we have to not put each other down at all. We cannot come into a space where we're far away from a place that we knew to a place that we don't know and make each other feel shame or embarrassment or guilt about any process that we go through while we're here.
I like that.
We have to show each other love. We have to help each other out, but show each other love. You know?
I like that. Now, I want to loneliness, right? Back in the diaspora, I lived a little bit in China, and I never spoke to my neighbor for a year or two whilst I was living in that apartment. And anytime I can share greetings, it doesn't hold to anything, right? And I know we might have something similar from the US and UK.
Absolutely.
Where people are always by themselves, causing loneliness. Can that cause any kind of mental illness or depression?
Absolutely. And there's this new dynamic. I don't know how new it is, but I want to speak about it. Online shopping. Somebody might be watching this and think this is funny, but I'm serious. Because now you not only can you isolate and stay inside, but you don't have to go out to even shop. You have people who can buy your groceries for you. I lived with a neighbor who did not talk to me for years at all, and I felt depressed. I was suffering because now that I'm here in Ghana, listen, you can't cough too loud for somebody to not say, Ajua. That's not Ajua. They all know that it's me. And listen, if I go to the shop too many times without my husband, I guarantee you, Daddy, who sells all the electric things in my neighborhood, he goes, what happened to your husband? Where is Kweku? Oh, we haven't seen. There is no secrecy. If you don't come out for even 2 days, somebody is coming to ring the bell to say, do you have water?
Okay?
Yeah. You know, and that's one thing that I love about. Now, are they nosy? Are we nosy? I mean, I think that's a thing. I think that's a colored people's thing. We can be a little nosy. You know, everybody knows. We recently bought a car, finally, thank heaven. And everybody knows what we drive, what our car looks like, right? But that makes me feel safe. That also makes me feel safe. I'm not afraid of visibility. That's okay.
Can we find a balance where people can care about you, your communities can care about you to the point where they are not too nosy to make you feel uncomfortable? Do you think we can have a balance?
I think we can. I think we can have a balance. I think that's important. And I think we can have that balance. And sometimes we have to learn to ask for what we want. Because I am noticing that communication is sometimes one-sided, especially if it's an elder to someone younger. But it's okay to say, you know, this is a little uncomfortable for me. How do we, and that's something we don't talk enough about, communication skills. How do we communicate ourselves? If somebody is crossing the line and being too nosy, how do we handle that? It's not okay to say, listen, I'm taking care of that, but thanks for your help.
What if they get offended?
That's okay, but there goes the people pleaser. What if they get offended? What's the worst that's going to happen? If they get offended, they should say, oh, I'm offended by this. And you should say, I'm sorry that you feel this way. That's not my intention, but I'm uncomfortable right now. You see, we have to learn to practice communication skills. We have to learn.
Interesting. Well, we're almost at the end of the conversation. I see you have some books here.
I did. I actually brought the 4 agreements because this book has been life-changing for me, and it helped me to understand that we should not take things personal. We should be impeccable with our word, and a bunch of other things that are in here. And I brought it to share because he talks in here about the inner critic. And he says, There is no enemy greater than the one inside. Nobody abuses us or judges us more than we do to ourselves. And if we don't come away from being the victim, which leads to my second book that I wanted to mention, Breaking Free from the Victim Trap. It's old. It's an old book, but it's an amazing book. Breaking Free from the Victim Trap. And there's a part in this book where it says, you need to list what your personal needs are, both emotionally and physically. Get in tune with yourself. Connect with your own needs. And then you need to list the people who you've been taking care of instead of yourself. That means that something needs to change. We need to change something when we're doing that. Are you aware of the resentment that you hold when you take care of others and they don't reciprocate that? That resentment is not good for your soul. So there needs to be a boundary. You are not a victim. Choose yourself first. There's nothing wrong with that.
That will not make you selfish.
That will not make you selfish. And give within reason. I mean, I'm a giver. I love to give. And I was just telling my dear sister, Nanette, she's a very powerful sister, Ghanaian sister. And I was telling her, abundance allows me to give without attachment. Because I'm not operating from a place of lack. So I can just give. Right. I am abundant enough to give my time to be here today. I feel rich. I'm not stressing, right? Because I can be here. I have the time to be here. That makes me feel abundant. I'm not a victim. I'm not going to come here and do this and be like, oh, Hayford made me miss my sessions. How dare him do that? No. Yeah. I committed to this and I have the time to do it. Abundance allows me to feel wealthy. Allows me to feel like I can give without attachment.
The victim mentality. Let's speak about the trauma we've been through as Black people and how we can escape that victim mentality.
Yeah, because we think the white man all the time. And it is a thing. There is a dichotomy of white supremacy and colonization. But I see it here in Ghana too, where, you know, they will treat somebody who is non-melanated, a European, way better than they treat me in certain spaces. Yeah. Right?
Because they assume the white people have money and opportunities for them than their own colored people.
That's the victim trap. That is what victimhood will do. It will keep you stuck. So how can you attract abundance operating from that place? To the point where you're going to treat some people better than the other? Because you think you're going to gain something from that? You'll always be poor. Always. And let's bring that back to forget about like a global or like a group of people. That doesn't just apply to Ghanaian. Anyone who sees themselves as a victim. If you're still operating from the place of, I was abused, this thing happened to me, you'll never break from that trap. Right? So it takes time and it takes work, but...
Do you think that mentality is holding Black people back in general, even in the diaspora, even in Americas?
Absolutely. I honestly, truly believe that. It holds us back because operating from a place of lack means you don't have enough. When everything we need, you know, like this, I went to the African Prosperity Network event. And this is the conversation we were having there. Money is an illusion. It is all, it's something that was made up. It's something that was made up. So if we're operating from this place of not enoughness and I can't, and the things that we tell ourselves, then of course we're going to cause harm to others. Of course we're going to do things and sacrifice and go to Dubai for $75,000 for somebody to piss on me because I'm going to get $75,000, you know? Yeah, of course we're going to operate from that place. I do believe that melanated people, even in the United States, when you look at corporations, in the 1800s, 1% of corporations were Black owned. And in 2024, 1% of corporations are Black owned.
Nothing changed.
Nothing has changed. Dr. Claude Anderson, when he talks about powernomics, get into that. But we spend $5 trillion a year. Our dollars in the United States are Black dollars. We're not victims. We have it. We're not pooling our money in the right places.
But we don't have the right mindset to keep it.
But we don't have the right mindset to keep it. But we go to church on Sunday and we give the money.
And then the money go to Europe and then they use that to loan their white people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting.
It's a cycle.
Interesting.
It's a cycle. So we're talking about a macro view and a micro view. We're talking about the individual and the collective. Because like I always say, if one person is healed or working on their healing, if the rest of us ain't working on it, that doesn't do anything for us. So many of us have life commitments because we want to transform the global perspective, right? What you do to bring awareness on Diasporians and what's happening on the continent is because you care about the global, right? What I do in doing this work is because I care. We need enough of us that have a forward-thinking mindset to be in leadership positions to help transform.
If someone is watching this and has been touched and have even identified some of the symptoms of either mental illness, depression, and want to reach out to you, or even how do they go about that?
Okay, so to work with me directly.
To reach out to somebody.
Well, yes, you have to. I mean, in Ghana, I don't think this exists, but in the United States, there is an online suicide prevention and mental health portal that you can dial. But a lot of people don't use that, so I'm not even going there because a lot of people don't trust who's on the other side, right? So we have to return to eldership. A big problem that we're suffering from in the African diaspora is our elders. We need to return to eldership. We need to go to the people who lived longer than us to find out and to gain counsel. We need to find people that we can trust and go to for advice. That was a game changer in my life because my trauma and the wounds that I carried made me not trust anybody. And I have an elder in my life, my godmother, who, I mean, it took forever for me to break through to realize that I can trust her and that she has my best interests at hand, because my trauma and my wounds made me believe that people who love me will eventually hurt me.
And you are getting that from where?
I learned that from my family culture, my relationship with my mother. They might not be hurting you intentionally, but there was hurt. So I was afraid of getting stung again. I was too busy moving my hand from the fire. So I told myself, I can't trust anyone. But what did that lifestyle do for me? It made me suffer in silence. I couldn't do that anymore. I could not live like that anymore, or else it would lead to a slow death. So I had to connect to my own healing. I had to connect to trusting myself. And then I had to identify people in my life who I trust. But don't play with me, because I go to therapy too. I don't play about therapy. I don't play about my resources. I don't play about doing Reiki on myself. I have all these tools. I make sure I learned Reiki, the art of Reiki, which is energy healing. I practice Reiki. I went to level 3 where I'm a master teacher and I teach people how to do Reiki.
Oh, wow.
I do that and I'm ready to bring that to Ghana. I actually did a Reiki circle out in Cape Coast not long ago and I'm like, I need to do more Reiki circles. I need spaces where I can do Reiki circles. So I learned tools to bring healing into my own life. I go to the therapy. I went to the support groups. I have a spiritual godmother. I have, a community. I have, people that I can trust. I had to change my life to really heal. I could not do it alone anymore. So if you are watching this and you think you can still do it alone, take a look at what's happening around you and ask yourself, can you really do this alone? Find one person that you can trust. One person. And that one person may be able to send you to someone else. And if you want to reach out to me because of the services that I offer, do that.
Wow, thanks for sharing all this. It means a lot to me because I've learned so much today. And I think people watching this also have learned a lot. If you do have, let's address you had a third book, Journey.
I did. I do. I have a third book that I actually wanted to read something, if it's okay. I don't know if we have the time. The book looks like really special right now because I've had it for so many years. And I had a clinical supervisor when I was doing my license. Mary Jean, if you watch this, she gave this to me as a gift when I was going through the process of getting my license as a clinical therapist. And this book is really about daily meditations on the path to freeing your soul. And it's really about freeing yourself from the limiting beliefs that you have about how life is and how life should be and who you are. And there's a piece that I want to read that I often read in my classes and in my work, and I thought it was really good. And, you know, I teach about the inner child. And today I spoke about the inner child, the part of you that is unresolved, that was left in your past, that you grew up with you, but she's not, or he's not really grown up. He's still, and she's still suffering inside. And it's called the inner child. That part of you is your inner child. We have to connect to that part of ourselves. If we leave our child behind, that child is always going to take over and destroy things. That child needs to be resolved for us to live a free life. And so it says, forgive your inner child for being so afraid. No matter how much work we've done on ourselves, no matter how committed we are to healing, there may be a part of us that's 4 years old when we deal with certain people. There may be a part of us that still feels frozen, frightened, powerless, and abandoned when we face certain situations. We may be all dressed up and look grown up, have our professional hat on, but the person wearing it is 4, and they're scared, afraid to speak up, relax, and be who we are. A powerful, sensitive, creative, competent, intelligent, and wise adult. Watch for these 4-year-olds. Be gentle, kind, compassionate. Forgive them for being so frightened. They have reasons that are valid, understandable, and sometimes noble. But their reasons come from a long time ago, and this is now. We're grown now. We're strong. We're free. We can walk away. We can speak up. We can laugh, and we can say how we feel. And we can't be abandoned anymore because we know how to live life on our own. Watch for your 4-year-old. This child may never completely leave you, but you don't have to let him or her continue to run the show.
That's powerful. I like that. Thanks for sharing your knowledge,
You're welcome.
your experiences.
Thank you.
This will inspire many people. Hopefully begin to let them go out more, to open up to people about their mental health and stuff like that. So yes, if you do have a final message to the people watching, what would that message be?
That message is that you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. You are loved, you are lovable, and you are loving. And when I say find someone that you can trust, I don't mean just anyone. Not that trauma bond person that deep down you know doesn't mean you well, but you're still attaching yourself to them. Not an addiction. Someone who you know that you can, that has value and integrity, and just reach out. Reach out.
All right. All the informations will be in the description. If you want to reach out to her, find her. Check out the description. Email, everything will be there. And where we are currently filming is called Jendu Place. Jendu Place is a co-working space located in East Legon, very close to American House. If you're coming from the US, UK, the diaspora, you have a remote work that you do, you need more reliable internet and electricity, Jendu Place is the place for you. So come check it out. And when you get here, tell them you're coming from Web Nation Africa. You might get a discount. And guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. If it really touched your heart, share to friends and family so that they can benefit too. This is very important information. As I said, mental illness, mental health, depression is not discussed among our community a lot. And this is one of the initiatives that hopefully would kind of enhance that for people to reach out for help. So share to friends and family, and comment down below what you really liked about this episode, or even your experiences. If you're going through the same thing, comment down. Yes. And so without further ado, let's say bye-bye to the people watching. All right? Bye-bye. Peace out.
Thank you, Hayford.